Be careful doing private events as a stripper. I worked as a dancer for a few years. Most nights I worked at the club, but sometimes I did private events to make some extra money. I always took one of the bouncers that I knew from the club as my bodyguard and gave him a cut of what I made. I also only agreed to small events with a max of 10 to 15 people. One day a guy called me and booked me for a small birthday party for his brother. I explained the rules. No touching or grabbing, nothing sexual would be happening, and I only do what I'm comfortable with, to which he said he understood. I picked up my bouncer friend Tank and headed out to the event. When we arrived, we immediately noticed it was a huge party of at least 60 to 70 people, all of them being men. Tank asked me if I was still comfortable dancing for the party, and I agreed since we were already there. The group of men were really loud when I walked in, and they were extremely intoxicated, which was the first red flag. A few guys instantly started touching me, and Tank lightly pushed them away, telling them no touching and that the show hasn't started yet. While we were walking to the bathroom to change, another guy grabbed my butt. Tank pushed him off and started arguing with him. At this point, we should have left, and if I knew what was about to go down, we would have. Part 2 of why you should be careful doing private events as a stripper. I went to the bathroom to change into my dancing clothes and get ready. I could hear the guys asking where I was and getting hyped up. I went to the living room where I'd be performing and started dancing for the party. I got close to the birthday boy, and a few guys started aggressively grabbing me in places they shouldn't. I looked over and saw Tank leaning over the couch, warning the guys to stop touching me. A few drunk guys came up to Tank, put their hands on his chest, and pushed him back, telling him not to worry about me. I could tell things were about to go downhill fast. When the song finished, I told him I was going to change my outfit, grab Tank, and rush to the bathroom. Tank told me it was time to go and said we should sneak out through the open garage door. I quickly got dressed and we snuck into the garage. The guys instantly noticed we were leaving and pursued us. As we were running for the open garage door, it began to close on us. We were barely able to make it out. About 15 guys ran out after us, and Tank told me to run to the car. As I was running, I looked back and saw Tank pull out a gun and tell them not to come any closer as he was backing up. Luckily, he was able to get to the car with me and we sped off. After this incident, I stopped doing private events. Story time of how I made my high school bully's dad my sugar daddy. Freshman year wasn't the best time for me. I wasn't the most popular or best looking girl at school. I was really shy, and instead of trying to make friends and talk to people, I kept to myself. Most people let me do my own thing, but then there was a girl named Claire. I don't know what I ever did to this girl, but she made my life miserable every chance she got. Making fun of my looks and putting me down in front of others was almost a daily ritual for Claire. My mom didn't have a lot of money, so I couldn't afford the cool clothing brands and styles that were in. Claire would call me out for being poor and say I got all my clothes from Goodwill, all while laughing. One day at lunch, she smacked the tray out of my hands as I was passing by, and food got all over me. This resulted in the whole cafeteria staring and laughing at me. Fast forward to the end of senior year, and I had a major glow up. I was more confident, people started noticing me, and I had a lot of friends. I figured it was time to start dating, but I didn't really like anyone at school, so I downloaded a dating app. I matched with a handsome older guy who was looking for a sugar baby. I looked him up on Instagram to see more pictures and saw Claire in one of his photos. Upon further inspection, I discovered that this man was her recently divorced dad. I immediately messaged him. Part 2 of how I made my high school bully's dad my sugar daddy. I began chatting back and forth with Claire's dad through the dating app. He was twice my age, but he was handsome, and given the circumstances, I had to give this my best shot. He told me he was looking for a beautiful girl to spoil and spend time with, and made it very clear that he was interested in me. After talking for a few weeks, we set up our first date, which was dinner at a nice restaurant, followed by shopping. I knew this man had money because I remember Claire being one of the rich girls at school, and I was right. He took me to the Louis store and let me pick out any bag I wanted. We kept talking and it was working out really nicely for me. He would send me money every week for makeup, to get my nails and hair done, or for whatever else I needed in between dates. One week he said he couldn't go on our usual Saturday night outing because his daughter was coming over for dinner. I was not going to waste this opportunity. I told him how much I was looking forward to seeing him and asked if I could join them. He was hesitant at first, but I eventually talked him into it. I'll never forget the look on Claire's face when I walked in and kissed her dad. I showed Claire the new purse that her dad had bought me and bragged about how well he's always treating me. She was fuming and stormed out shortly after. To this day, he's still my sugar daddy, and Claire hates everything about it. This is why you should be careful working in food delivery. When the pandemic hit, I lost my job and signed up to work for a food delivery app. I was making good money and the tips were nice too. During the first few months of working, I never had any weird experiences or customers. For the most part, everything was fine. There were times when I was a little scared of dropping off the food because it was in sketchy neighborhoods or it was dark outside, but nothing ever happened. I started feeling confident in my position and I let my guard down. One night, I got a delivery request and the tip was bigger than the total order. When I looked at the details of how to drop it off, I realized why the tip was so big. The instructions asked if I could open the door and bring it inside of the house as they were bedbound and unable to walk to the door. I knew I shouldn't do it. It was super against company policy, but I had an aunt who was bedbound and it hit a soft spot. When I opened the door of the house, I was hit with the most vile stench that's ever hit my nose. I looked around and called out to the customer. It was silent for a few seconds. Suddenly, someone croaked out, "I'm back here, come on down." The voice came from a bedroom down the hallway that was pitch black. As I walked towards the room, my stomach was turning. I entered the room and put the order down, but I didn't see anyone. When I turned around to leave, suddenly a man appeared in front of me. Part 2 of why you should be careful working in food delivery. This man was tall, wore glasses, and was balding. He was also fully functional from what I could tell. In this moment, I realized how badly I had messed up. I was cornered away from the doorway. He thanked me for dropping off his order. I politely replied, "You're welcome," and tried to step around him to leave. He took a step in the same direction at the same exact moment and asked me what I was up to for the rest of the night. My heart was pounding out of my chest, but I quickly replied that I had another order to drop off and that they were waiting, so I had to go. However, he didn't move. Somehow, I mustered up enough courage to step towards him and say, "Excuse me, I really have to go." His hand was on the door and I knew he was either going to let me go or shut it and attack me. He stared at me for a moment, then hesitated and stepped out of the way. I quickly slipped past him and made a beeline for the front door. As I twisted the doorknob, I heard his footsteps running towards me. I swiftly opened the door, slammed it behind me, and sprinted towards my car. I felt the adrenaline rushing through my veins. I looked back to see if he was running after me, but he was just standing in the doorway, watching me run away with a smirk on his face. I never should have gone inside for a delivery, and I never will again. Story time about how a girl used me for her OnlyFans content. My boyfriend and I decided we wanted to spice things up and bring another girl in. I've always been attracted to girls, so it was actually my idea, and of course my boyfriend didn't object. We made a profile on a dating app saying what we were looking for. I didn't think too many girls would be down for this sort of thing, but I was so wrong. To my surprise, we got a ton of matches and messages from cute girls. One girl named Becca messaged us and I was really interested because she was so beautiful, like an Instagram model. We started messaging back and forth for a few days, and then we decided to meet up downtown at a club on the weekend to get drinks and have a fun night out. I asked her for her Instagram to make sure she was legit and her profile checked out. The night came to meet up and she looked just like her pictures, a total baddie. We got drinks and started talking and she seemed really cool. A few drinks later, we were dancing, and a drink after that, we were all making out. We were having so much fun, and we stayed until the club closed at 2 a.m. We were planning on going home, but Becca insisted we come to her place for a drink and hang out some more. She hyped us up, and we agreed. We got an Uber and caught a ride together to her place. This is when things got wild. Part 2 of how a girl used me for her OnlyFans content. We pulled up to her place and hopped out of the Uber. She showed us in and made us a really good drink that kept our buzz going. One thing led to another and we ended up in her bedroom. She asked if we wanted to hook up and we agreed. In the middle of the action, she asked if we wanted to make some videos for fun. I was a little hesitant, but she insisted and said that it would be exciting. I agreed, but only if they were recorded on my phone, which she agreed with. I started recording and got some really good content. The next morning, I woke up with a text from Becca saying how much fun she had and asking me to send her the videos we made. I sent them over and she immediately blocked me on everything after receiving them. I was shocked. I told my boyfriend that she blocked me and grabbed his phone to see if he was blocked as well. I checked her Instagram and saw that she posted a story update 2 minutes ago. The story said, "New threesome videos on sale on my OnlyFans. DM me for the link." A few minutes later, my boyfriend was blocked on her account as well. I couldn't believe she used us for OnlyFans content and was profiting off of our goods. Luckily, our faces and tattoos weren't in any of the videos we sent her. Looking back on it now, it's kind of funny, but to this day, I still think I deserve half of the money she made off of those videos. This is why you need a security system for your house. A few years ago, I was renting a house in Northern California. The neighborhood was just outside of the suburbs. It seemed like the perfect balance of having space and having nice neighbors close enough not to feel isolated. The area had no streetlights, so it was very dark at night, but it didn't bother me. I got home from work one evening in midwinter. It was a cloudy night, so pulling up, I only saw what my headlights and porch light illuminated. When I got out of my car, I caught a whiff of cigarette smoke. That was odd as I had never smelled that before around my house, but I didn't see anyone nearby, so I ignored it and went inside. I had just gotten off a shift with a few hours of overtime and I was exhausted. It wasn't even 7 yet, but I decided to call it an early night. I woke up sometime later when I heard a noise inside of my house. I wasn't immediately worried because my best friend had a spare key and would sometimes come over. However, he'd always text me and let me know, but when I checked my phone, there were no messages. I called out my friend's name. There were a few seconds of silence before I heard someone stomping as they ran through the bottom floor. I leapt out of bed and ran to the closet. They were already up the stairs by the time I opened the door and stepped inside. I was terrified. That's when I heard them thunder down my hallway. Part 2 why you need a security system for your house. The house had 2 bedrooms on either hallway and a bathroom. The bedroom doors were closed, but the bathroom door was creaked open. I was so lucky in that moment because he sprinted to the bathroom. That gave me just enough time to open the attic access in my closet and pull myself up. As I lifted myself, I heard the person run towards my room. I had just pulled my feet inside when my bedroom door burst open. He walked in and stopped. When he didn't see me, he went and checked the other room, then came back and turned on the light. A moment later, he ripped open my closet door. After a few seconds, he stepped away and I heard a loud crash come from my room, followed by a scream of frustration and anger. Then he went downstairs. I had left my phone when I ran for the closet and wasn't sure I could climb down without him hearing. After some time, the noises stopped. I counted to 1,000, then climbed down to call the police. My bed had been flipped, furniture knocked over, and all my things destroyed. The only thing missing was a knife from my kitchen. The police found that the side door had been forced open by a crowbar. They also found cigarette butts and an empty tube used for drugs. They think he had been watching the house for a while. I installed some security on the house after this. I can't imagine what would have happened if he had come to my room first. This is how I found out my childhood best friend was a ghost. I grew up with a girl named Katie Wells. I lived on a farm, and Katie lived with an old woman named Irene in the next house over. Katie and Irene weren't related, but whenever I asked Katie about her, she would just change the subject. It seemed like they never got along because they never talked to each other. Katie seemed really sheltered, and I thought it was because Irene wouldn't let her do much. Whenever I would talk about boys, or a new celebrity crush I had, or even a new popular TV show, she never knew what I was referring to. A while later, my mom ended up quitting her job and working from home, so she didn't take me to Katie's house to have Irene watch me anymore. I remember wanting to go over to see Katie, and I asked my mom a few times, but she always said no. I eventually made new friends, and me and Katie grew apart. A couple years went by, and I started to realize I never saw Katie around anymore. She used to talk about her dad, Pat, a lot, so I assumed she went to live with him. I saw Irene outside one day, and I asked her how Katie was doing and where she'd been. However, she just looked at me like I was crazy. She told me that she had no idea who Katie was and that no one has ever lived with her. I told Irene about how we used to play together at her house, and she gave me a weird look and asked me if I was feeling okay. This is when things got strange. Part 2 of how I found out my childhood best friend was a ghost. The more details I told Irene about Katie, the more she looked at me like I was mental. She assured me it was just me and her in the house when my mom would drop me off. I was shocked. I went home and asked my mom about Katie, and she gave me the same confused look Irene just gave me and told me she didn't know what I was talking about. I couldn't believe it. How was I the only one who remembered her? I was starting to think I was going insane. It even crossed my mind that maybe Katie was an imaginary friend that I made up when I was little. However, I vividly remember playing with her every time I went over. I thought about it for days and I couldn't get it out of my head. The mystery kept me up at night, and I even dreamt about my old childhood friend. I decided to do some research on Irene's house, and my heart sank to my stomach when I realized what happened. I discovered the first person to ever own the house was a man named Patrick Wells back in 1941. I tried to find anything I could on Katie, but nothing came up. I remember Katie talking about her dad Pat when I was younger. It finally made sense how she never knew about any recent events I would bring up and why her and Irene would never communicate. I realized that I was the only one who saw Katie because she wasn't alive. I had been playing with the spirit all that time growing up. Crime Fanatic Friday, how my sister tried to kill me and my younger siblings. Growing up, my sister Stacy was never mean. She adored me and my siblings, and she was even like a mom to us since ours was mostly absent from our lives. We lived with my dad and grandma, who did their best to make sure that we had a good relationship with our half-siblings. My sister went to go live with our mom because she wanted a relationship with her. After this, I hardly ever saw her until one weekend when my grandma decided to let me go spend the weekend at my mom's. That weekend, my sister was crying out for help when she was beaten by my mom's boyfriend. She ran to my grandma's house, who lives over an hour away, but decided to come back. When she got back home, she was sick and throwing up blood. She asked my mom to take her to the ER, but my mom just shrugged it off and told her that she was being dramatic. This is when my mom decided to go out drinking with her boyfriend and force my sister to babysit me and my younger siblings. I was 5 years old and my siblings were 1, 2, and 4. My sister reached her breaking point and lost it. She completely trashed the trailer home and broke everything into pieces before turning her attention to us. She tied us up, gagged us with clothes, and duct taped over our mouths. This is when we heard gunshots, followed by the smell of smoke before passing out. Crime Fanatic Friday Part 2, how my sister tried to kill me and my younger siblings. After smelling the smoke, my little sister and I passed out. I remember waking up in the ambulance and finding out that my older sister Stacy had found my mom's gun. She started firing it off at the ceiling of our home and then lit the couch on fire, trying to set fire to the trailer with us in it. Then she went outside and called the police. She told them that she had fallen asleep and 2 men had broken into our trailer trying to rob us. She told them that these men hit her in the head with a gun, and when she regained consciousness, she ran outside because she smelled the smoke. Obviously, the police didn't buy any part of her story, and she ended up confessing that she was tired of babysitting us, which is why she did it. She was put on trial when she was only 16, but got tried as an adult and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Stacy passed away last year from self-harm by means of hanging. She was only 25 years old. The news articles got all the details wrong and painted her in a bad light. Her life wasn't easy and she was crying out for help, but no one was listening. I've forgiven her for what she did. I love her and I wish that she rests in peace. This is why you should think twice before getting put to sleep at the dentist. I always had bad teeth growing up. When I was younger, I would stay up late eating candy and drinking soda without a care in the world. A few years later, my teeth needed some serious work. My mom didn't make a lot of money and also didn't care too much, so I never got them fixed as a kid. When I was 18, I got a job and made it a priority to fix my teeth with the money I earned. I did some research online for an affordable dentist and found one that would take my job subpar insurance. When I arrived for my first visit, I immediately noticed the office was worn down and old. From the moment I got there, something didn't feel right, but I chalked it up to being nervous because I was scared to see what the dentist had to say. I also couldn't help thinking about the potential pain of getting my teeth fixed. After the dentist made his initial assessment, I noticed he kept putting his hand on my shoulder as he was talking to me, which made me a little uncomfortable. He said I needed serious work done and advised me to be put to sleep to make it pain-free and easy, to which I agreed. I came in about a week later and was put to sleep while he worked on my teeth. I was pretty groggy when I woke up, but I noticed pretty quickly that something was wrong. I was terrified to realize that my bra was lifted up on one side of my chest. My experience only got worse from here. Part 2, why you should think twice before getting put to sleep at the dentist. A million things were going through my head when I woke up. I thought that maybe when I was groggy, I was moving around and my bra rode up on one side. I didn't want to believe that anything bad happened when I was put to sleep. I thought I was overthinking it and told myself that it sounded crazy, but it was lingering in the back of my mind. When I went back for my next appointment, I told my dentist that I wanted to stay awake. However, he kept arguing with me and trying to convince me to be put under again. I flat out told him that I was uncomfortable with being put to sleep for a second time and refused. He was annoyed and upset, which was a big red flag for me. I ended up just leaving and getting my work done somewhere else. I also filed a report of exactly what happened and what I experienced with this weirdo. A few months later, I received a call stating that the dentist I filed a complaint against was arrested. More information about my complaint was needed to build a case against him. It turns out this dentist and a few other staff in his office were abusing female patients that they put to sleep before working on them. Multiple patients filed complaints about this guy, which sparked the investigation. After this, his practice was shut down and his dental license was taken away. He ended up getting a much-deserved hefty prison sentence. Story time of how I was almost abducted and caught by a serial killer. In February of 2012, I decided to visit my grandfather's grave because it was his birthday. His passing was really hard for me to deal with because he had just died the previous year in March and the wounds were still pretty fresh. It was daytime and I was kneeling in front of his grave with my head down. I was mourning and crying as I thought of our memories together. However, something didn't feel right. For some reason, a sense of urgency filled my stomach. I could somehow tell something bad was about to happen, but I didn't know what. The area around the cemetery was covered in woods. In that moment, I looked up to see a man full-on sprinting from the woods in my direction. Although I was in shock, I forced myself to get up and run as fast as possible towards my truck. By the time I made it to my truck, he had gotten about 50 feet from me. I jumped in and locked the doors instantly. That's when he stopped and threw his hands up in the air in a huff like his favorite team had just lost a football game. I started my truck and slammed my foot on the gas pedal, driving right past him. Our eyes were locked and neither of us broke eye contact for a second. I got a really good look at his face. At first, I thought I was your average weirdo, but little did I know I was looking into the face of one of the most notorious serial killers. Part 2 of how I was almost abducted and caught by a serial killer. A few years after this incident, I was at work, bored out of my mind, and decided to download an app. This app had a ton of paranormal, cryptid, serial killer, and UFO articles. As I was browsing through the serial killer articles, I came across one that made my heart drop into my ass. Israel Keyes. He was widely known for murdering an underage girl in Alaska, dismembering her body, and dumping the pieces into a frozen lake. He would travel across the U.S. burying kill kits in places long before he ever committed the crimes. After he murdered Samantha Koenig in Alaska, he traveled to Texas for a wedding in a city not too far from where I live and disappeared for a bit. Not even his own family knew where he was. He was arrested in Lufkin and brought to a city one over from me before he was extradited back to Alaska to stand trial. A year ago, I found a book on him and read about his crimes. At the end of the book, he describes some of his favorite places to abduct people were public parks and cemeteries. I often wonder if there's a kill kit buried in the woods of the cemetery that he tried to abduct me in. You were fast, Israel, but I think that my grandfather was watching out for me that day because I was faster. Storytime about how I had to choose between my family and the love of my life. I come from a pretty well-off family. Growing up, I never had to worry about anything because it was always taken care of by my parents. They were pretty religious and we would attend church every week. From a young age, I knew that I was attracted to girls. I also knew that my parents wouldn't accept it, so I buried my feelings deep. Luckily, I was never tempted because I never met anyone that I had feelings for. Fast forward to my senior year of high school. I was on the volleyball team and a new girl named Juliet had transferred to our school and joined the team. We quickly became friends, but there was always a lingering connection between us. I had easily developed a crush on her, but I knew that I couldn't act on it. During spring break, we went to a party and liquid courage led me to confessing my feelings for her. When I told her everything, she kissed me and I felt butterflies fluttering in my stomach. We secretly started dating after this and only my older sister and best friend knew about it. However, the more time I spent with Juliet, the more I knew that she was the one. One night, I finally built up the courage to tell my parents. Unfortunately, the reaction was worse than I expected. They yelled, cried, and told me they'd never accept it. Then they told me they would cut me off and kick me out if I kept seeing her. I was scared and didn't know what to do. Part 2 of how I had to choose between my family and the love of my life. After my parents gave me the ultimatum, I was terrified. The next day after school, I met up with Juliet with the intention of breaking things off. When I told her what happened, she comforted me and told me that it was okay. She said she understood it was an impossible choice and wouldn't blame me for choosing my family. She just wanted me to be happy and do what was best for me. Juliet loved me enough to let me go, even though I knew it was killing her. This was the deciding factor for me. As much as my parents loved me, they didn't accept me for who I am, but Juliet always had. While my parents were at work, we went to my house and packed my things. I called my older sister and she took me in with open arms. I cried to her for a while because I knew that I would never speak to my parents again. A few years later, my sister was getting married and she wanted me to be her maid of honor. Juliet and I were still together and happier than ever. I knew that my family was going to be at the wedding, but I didn't care what they thought anymore. I walked in hand with Juliet and saw my parents' face drop at our entrance. The rest of the family made eyes as well, but we ignored them and enjoyed our night. A year later, I proposed to Juliet and she said yes. Even though I lost my parents, I don't regret my decision. Eventually, we'll make our own family. Crime Fanatic Friday, the Tylenol murders of 1982. On the morning of September 29th, 1982, a young said yes. Even though I lost my parents, I don't regret my decision. Eventually, we'll make our own family.